Following his graduation, Efosa completed his National Youth Service Corps, a required step for all Nigerian graduates. During this time, his peers in the program, many of whom had come from affluent families, couldn't help but admire his resilience and commitment. They had heard his story, and many of them were inspired by how far he had come. Efosa's next step was to travel abroad to further his studies. The scholarship he had won paving the way for him to pursue advanced research and contribute to the global petroleum industry. Efosa too made the same journey, heading off to further her studies in law. The two of them became fast friends during this time, supporting each other as they navigated new cultures and academic challenges abroad. Meanwhile, back in Ogute, life had carried on in much the same way. Efosa's mother, still bitter and unrelenting, had not changed a bit. She had not heard from Efosa since he left, and in her mind, he had probably fallen into the same fate she had always expected for him, a life of hardship and struggle. She assumed he must be in the city somewhere, pushing trucks or struggling to survive like other young men in the village who had no formal education or opportunities. In her eyes, Efosa was just another village boy who would never amount to much. The fact that she hadn't heard from him confirmed her belief. The idea of him becoming successful, of him achieving anything more than a life of labor, seemed outlandish to her. He couldn't fathom that he was studying abroad, excelling in his field, and carving out a future that was far brighter than anything she could have imagined for him. Efosa's step-brothers, Eiz and Jude, had also finished their National Youth Service. They were now back in Ogute, having completed their service year without much fanfare. Unlike Efosa, who had earned his way through every step of his education, Eiz and Jude had followed the more traditional path of middle-class privilege. They had been pampered by their mother and had been able to attend school without facing the kinds of hardships Efosa had endured. Though they had completed their NYSC, neither of them had any particular aspirations or plans beyond that. They had simply followed the path laid out for them, never having to fight for an opportunity the way Efosa had. In the village, their return was met with indifference. They didn't stand out, nor did they have the same kind of drive or ambition that Efosa had shown. To the villagers, they were just another pair of young men who had done what was expected of them and were now simply drifting, waiting for whatever came next. Efosa's stepmother, though, was content to let them lead this uneventful life. She didn't ask questions or wonder where Efosa had gone. She hadn't even thought to write or inquire about him. He was, in her eyes, a failure, and his absence only reinforced that belief. But Efosa's story was far from over. As the day passed, the future he had fought so hard to create continued to unfold in ways that no one, least of all his stepmother, could have imagined. His success abroad was just beginning to make waves in the field of petroleum engineering. As soon as the achievement would reach even the stars of those who had written him off long ago. As the years passed, Efosa's name would become known, not just in the village of Ogute or Port Harcourt, but on an international scale. His work, his research, and his contributions would begin to shape the future of the petroleum industry. And when the time was right, his stepmother and stepbrothers would finally learn the truth, that the boy they had once mocked or diminished had become one of the lead minds in his field, making a name for himself and changing the world in ways they could never have imagined. But time had not yet come. For now, Efosa focused on his studies, his future, and the road ahead, one that at last seemed limitless.
6 years had passed since Efosa left Nigeria, and in that time, he had transformed into a man of great accomplishment. His work with petroleum engineering had earned him international recognition, and the companies he had set up abroad were thriving. He had not only established himself as a successful entrepreneur, but had also stayed true to his cause, nurturing his dream of one day returning to Nigeria to give back to his people. Esoe, his long-time companion, and now fiancé, had been his pillar of support throughout his journey. He had excelled in her legal studies and had become a well-respected lawyer in her own right. The two of them had become inseparable, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. As Efosa business ventures expanded, it became clear to both of them that they would eventually return to Nigeria to contribute to the country's growth and development. And so, after years of planning, Efosa and Esoe made the decision to return to Nigeria. Efosa was ready to put his wealth of experience and skills he had acquired abroad to work in his homeland. He had big plans, not just for his businesses, but for the future of the nation he had never forgotten. Upon returning to Nigeria, Efosa set up 2 companies in the oil and gas sector. His goal was clear. He wanted to create jobs, empower local communities, and introduce cutting-edge technologies to the industry. Efosa was determined to bring a new level of excellence to Nigeria's petroleum industry and lead the way for the future generations. Meanwhile, his stepbrothers Sehis and Jude were back in Ogute, trying to find their footing after years of living in the shadow of their mother's expectations. He had completed their National Youth Service 8 years ago and struggled to find meaningful work. Without the drive or ambition that Efosa had, they were content with living life as it came. Little did they know that they would work in Efosa's company. 6 months after the companies were up running, Efosa was in the office going through the list of newly employed staff. His company was growing fast, and the staff roster was expanding. As he flipped through the names, he paused when he came across 2 familiar names, Sehis and Jude. His heart skipped a beat. He couldn't believe his eyes. Efosa was stunned. His brothers had somehow ended up working for him, without knowing that the man he had once mocked was the one signing their paychecks. The realization hit him hard. He had made it this far, and now his stepbrothers were working for him. Their pride and ignorance never allowed them to recognize the significance of the names on the company roster. For a moment, Efosa felt a rush of mixed emotions. Anger at their indifference, resentment for how they had treated him, but also a strange sense of satisfaction. He had come full circle. They didn't know that the man they had once overlooked was now in position of power and influence, able to offer them jobs while they remained blissfully unaware. Efosa's mind raced as he weighed his options. What should he do next? Should he reveal himself to them now? Should he confront them about how they had treated him all those years? Or should he let them continue working in the company without ever knowing who he really was? He quickly made up his mind. This would be a test to see if they could recognize his worth on their own. Efosa wasn't ready to expose himself just yet. He wanted to see how his brothers would behave, how they would approach their work, and whether they would ever suspect that their boss was the very brother he had once dismissed as nothing more than a worldly boy, he despised Efosa. Efosa called his personal assistant into his office. He instructed her to keep his identity hidden and to make sure that neither he nor Jude was able to know the fact that he was their employer. They were to work like any other staff member, following the company's procedures and contributing just as any other employee would. His personal assistant nodded. "Understood, sir. I will make sure everything stays confidential." Efosa had not revealed his identity to any of the staff, except SOA and the personal assistant. Efosa gave a sigh of nod of approval. He trusted her. Now it was time to focus on the work ahead, building his empire and making the impact he had always dreamed of. He knew that there would be plenty of challenges along the way, but he was ready for whatever came next. Meanwhile, at the company, Ease and Jude continued to work in their respective roles. Neither of them had any idea who Efosa really was. They were comfortable in their positions, finally having jobs that provided some stability. But he had no inkling that their successful, influential boss was, in fact, the same Efosa he had once belittled and forgotten. Life at the company carried on, with Efosa carefully monitoring his brother's progress. As weeks passed, he began to see the result of his decision to remain anonymous. Ease and Jude, though capable in their own way, lacked the ambition and the drive that Efosa had shown from a youth age. They worked diligently, but it was clear that they were content with the status quo and had little desire to go beyond their assigned duties. Efosa couldn't help but feel a sense of pride that he had surpassed them. He had achieved what they never could have imagined, and now they were working under him. I saw her by his side, noticed the change in Efosa. She knew the burden he carried. The temptation to reveal his identity to his brothers was ever present, but Efosa remained composed, focusing on his goals. She supported his decision to wait. This, she knew, was a part of Efosa's journey. His need to prove to himself and to them that he was no longer the same boy he had once dismissed. Efosa was now at the helm of something much larger than any of them could comprehend. His companies were growing, creating more jobs and contributing to the national economy. And in the back of his mind, he knew that one day the truth would come out. But for now, he was content to let his brothers continue working under his radar. In the end, Efosa understood that their journey was different from his. They would never understand what it truly meant to fight for something, to claw your way up from nothing, as he had done. And when the time was right, they would learn. Through his success and his leadership, that generates greatness isn't inherited, it is earned. As the days went by, Efosa's empire grew stronger, and his future continued to unfold before him. His vision for Nigeria, for his companies, and for the future he had built was just beginning. But the question remained, how much longer will it take before his brothers will finally learn the truth about the man who they once mocked?
During the yearly holiday in Okute, a time when sons and daughters who have ventured out to the cities or abroad returned home, the village was filled with excitement. It was a season of celebration, with families gathering, showing off their success and flaunting their newfound wealth. Ease and Jude, having secured decent jobs thanks to Efosa's companies, arrived home with a show of pride. They were now driving new cars, courtesy of their positions in Efosa's enterprises. Although they still had no idea that their employer was their very home brother. Their return was the highlight of the holiday, and their stepmother always keen to take advantage of any opportunity to showcase her son's apparent success. Put together a grand fanfare in their honor. Villagers gathered, admiring the sleek cars and the supposed prosperity that Efosa and Jude now enjoyed. Efosa and Jude, with their new acquired wealth, basked in their attention, casually hinting at their success in the city. They were proud of their material gains, unaware that their true benefactor was the brother they once ridiculed. Amid the festivities, Efosa, in contrast, arrived quietly and in low key. He had no need to flaunt anything. He had accomplished more than Efosa and Jude could ever imagine. But his visit was discreet. Efosa had seen enough of people who craved recognition and validation. He didn't need the applause, but his very presence seemed to stir the air, as though the village sensed something had changed, though no one knew exactly what. His stepmother didn't miss the opportunity to mock him as always. "Look at him, still wandering around in those dirty clothes, pretending to be something. Look at my sons, the true men now," she sneered to anyone who would listen, making sure to undermine Efosa in front of the villagers. Efosa and Jude joined in, their admissive remark echoing their mother's sentiments. It hadn't changed. Despite the wet they were enjoying, their hearts remained the same, and they still couldn't fathom the depth of Efosa's journey or the magnitude of his success. However, it wasn't just the mocking remarks that stung. When Esoe, elegant and graceful, arrived by Efosa's side, the situation took a turn. Her beauty immediately caught the attention of the entire village. Her glowing smile and poised demeanor captivated everyone in the room. But it was Efosa and Jude who were most to be taken aback. They were immediately struck by how beautiful she was, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stop around them. Their eyes followed her every move, and they both began to whisper to each other. Their interest piqued. "That woman is something else," Jude muttered under his breath. Efosa, never one to shy away from a challenge, responded. "She must be Efosa's girlfriend, right? No way you could get someone like her. I bet she's just another one of those city women looking for a rich man." Both brothers were immediately struck by the idea that perhaps they could win her over. They had long lived with the belief that they could charm any woman they desired, and SOS beauty seemed like a prize they could easily claim. The fact that Efosa had a woman like her only fueled their desire to prove they could win her heart, something they now saw as a competition. Efosa, however, could sense what was happening. He was no fool. He knew his brothers well enough to know that they didn't care about relationships, only about status. They had always sought to use the others for their gain. The thought of them trying to win over Esoe stirred something in him, but he didn't react outwardly. Instead, he remained calm, watching them with quiet understanding. He knew that they were enjoying the fruits of his hard work and generosity without ever realizing it, and it amused him to no end. Efosa, turning to them with a quiet but pointed smile, said, "You guys are enjoying my generosity, aren't you? You are driving my cars, staying in my houses, and working at my companies, but I wonder, how long will you keep pretending you are not living off my success? You will never know how hard I fought to get to where I am. You still think this life was handed to you, don't you? Eis and Jude exchanged confused glances, unable to fully comprehend what Efosa was implying. They had no idea that their employer, who they assumed was just some city businessman, was actually their brother, the boy they had once bullied and left behind. The truth hadn't dawned on them, and they continued to chuckle at his remarks, dismissing them as a bitter talk of someone who had failed to make it in life. Efosa, held fast by their ignorance, decided it was time for him to do something that would have more meaning than just responding to their mockery. He wanted to show the village head his appreciation for the support he had received over the years. After the festivities, Efosa left the crowded scene and made his way to the village head's house. He had a deep respect for the man, who had believed in him and supported him when he had no one else to turn to. The village head had always looked out for Efosa, offering advice and encouraging people when things seemed good. At the village head's salon, Efosa knelt in respect, as was the custom. He just wanted to say thank you, sir, for your unwavering support all these years. I haven't forgotten it. I won't forget. You are one of the few who saw potential in me when others didn't. The head smiled, his eyes twinkling. Efosa, you have done more for yourself than anyone ever expected. You have proven that hard work, resilience, and humility are the keys to success. I am proud of you, my son. Efosa stood up, shaking the older man's hand. I'm not done yet, sir. I have only just begun. Meanwhile, back at the village festivities, the villagers continued to admire the spectacle of Eis and Jude's success. Their mother basking in their glory and no idea that her son's accomplishments were rooted in Efosa's generosity. She continued to make fun of him, dismissing him as irrelevant in front of her friends, but Efosa knew better than to engage. As the evening wore on, Efosa's brothers continued to plot how he would win over Esoe, oblivious to the fact that she was already committed to Efosa. They couldn't understand why a woman as beautiful and accomplished as Esoe would choose someone like Efosa over them. But that, of course, was the very thing they had never understood. Efosa's success was born of hard work, sacrifice, and integrity, qualities that they had never valued. Efosa, as he sat with the village head and talked about his plans for the future, knew that the time would come when his brothers would have to learn the truth. The life they had so carelessly enjoyed would soon face a reckoning. The truth will reveal itself, perhaps in the most unexpected way, and when it did, Efosa would be ready. But for now, he had more important things to focus on: his work, his future, and the woman he had chosen to share it all with. As the night drew to a close, Efosa couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before his brothers finally understood the true value of hard work and what it meant to earn success the right way. The days following Efosa's visit to the village head passed slowly, with the village slowly returning to its usual rhythm. Eis and Jude continued to flaunt their cars and their newfound success, boasting about their work in Efosa's companies without realizing the irony of it. Their pride was palpable, yet they remained blind to the reality that their lifestyle was the result of Efosa's generosity and foresight. Their stepmother, ever the opportunist, made sure that every villager knew of their success, while still undermining Efosa's at every turn. But Efosa was no fool. He had seen it all before. His brother's attitude had not changed. He continued to think that they were the ones who had made it, forgetting the hardships they had once imposed on him. He couldn't blame them for their ignorance, after all. They didn't know the full extent of his struggle and the hard work that had gone into the building the life he had now. Efosa had learned long ago that sometimes it was better to let people live in their delusions. He had bigger goals to focus on. Esoe by his side had grown even more confident and supportive. They had been inseparable for years, and now with their impending marriage, their bond was stronger than ever. Yet she could sense Efosa's subtle discomfort when it came to his brothers. She had seen the way they hid her, and she understood that Efosa was deliberately holding back from revealing his identity to them. Efosa, she said one night, as they sat together in their home in the city, "Do you think it's time to tell them? You have worked so hard, and they still don't realize what you've done for them. Maybe it's time they know who you really are." Efosa paused, considering her words. It had been years since he had confronted his brothers about their past behavior. But something told him that evening that revealing the truth now might be a mistake. His brothers hadn't changed. They were still the same people who had mocked and belittled him all those years ago. He wasn't sure if they were ready for the truth. Would he humble them, or would he create even more animosity? "I'm not sure, Esoe," Efosa finally replied. "I want them to see me as I am now, but I don't want them to pity me or resent me. They need to learn on their own, without me forcing the issue. If they ever truly realize what I have done for them, it will come from their own growth, not from me revealing it." Esoe nodded, her eyes understanding. "I see. I just don't want them to keep using you, Efosa. They have already taken so much from you without ever appreciating it." "I know," Efosa said, his voice low. "But it's not about what they take from me. It's about what I can give. What I can do to build something better for everyone. One day, they will have to face the reality of their own choices. And when they do, I'll be ready to help them if they are willing to learn." Efosa's word hung in the air, and Esoe sat in a quiet contemplation. She admired his patience, but she also understood that there were limits to how much one could endure. She had seen Efosa suffer through the harshest trials, only to rise again, stronger each time. But even she could sense that his patience with Eyiz and Jude was wearing him. Meanwhile, back in Ogute, life continued on as the usual festivity and gossip. Eyiz and Jude continued to boast about their successes, unwittingly perpetuating the illusion that they had made it on their own. One evening, as Efosa and Esoe were preparing to return to the village for a brief visit, Efosa received a call from the village head. The man's voice was urgent, his tone laced with concern.